We had a lot of time last time with you, so everything is good here in Geneva.
So you're in Geneva. The last time we spoke, you were the Chief Information Officer for the city of San Francisco. And so you've traveled quite a bit since then.
Yeah, I did. Quite frankly, if you talk about difficult choices in a career, leaving San Francisco is probably one of the toughest thing I've had to do so far, because that was it was heaven. I liked the job, I liked the city, I liked the teams. It was great, but there was something compelling in the call from the UN specialized agency that the World Health Organization is. Well, I'm sure we get into that.
Yes. So tell us about the World Health Organization and what was compelling about that phone call that took you away from being CIO for the city of San Francisco to make the move to Geneva.
Sure. Well, if you remember, I got the call a little bit before mid 2014, and I was pursuing the natural goals set for the city and county of San Francisco. I was not done. We were doing well, but I was not done. But if you remember, there was 2014, and it was the year where Ebola took everybody by surprise, and so that was a main driver. And in the same way of some of the arguments that the headhunter used when he told me that I would take the job at San Francisco, because some of what had to be done had not been done before, or were considered not doable. And I think we established that was not necessarily true. It's possible. Same thing here. The world was facing a pretty serious crisis in the form of the Ebola crisis, and it was an opportunity to demonstrate that all hands on deck means the CIO and all the IT soldiers at work to help protect populations, save lives, and avoid something completely out of control.
So tell us about the background of the World Health Organization, just so we have context, and then we'll talk about the infrastructure, and we'll talk about IT and the role of technology in fulfilling your mission.
Sure. When you ask somebody, okay, who do you work for? What do you do? It's usually a rather easy answer. It is not so natural when you ask people, okay, so I work for the UN. Well, there's the UN system. What is that? And then so what is the mandate of the UN? And then within the UN system, you have a specialized agency called the World Health Organization, WHO. So the UN strives. I'm going to make a very long story short. The UN works towards making a better world. And we'll talk about how the UN goes about making this more achievable. Chunk it in manageable chunks, and those are the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them, and within the 17 goals, Goal 3 of the Sustainable Development Goal is health. Ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all people of all ages everywhere. So the World Health Organization was created to ensure healthy lives for all populations everywhere at all ages. So our governance, our financing, I'll tell you a few words about that. We have 194 member states, countries. We've got our global headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland. So from my office to the left, you've got the Jura mountain, and then on the other side, you've got the lake and the Alps. So good site. We've got 6 regional offices and more than 150 country offices. and then I'll tell you that the way we are financed, 30% is through member states with assessed contribution, 30%, and 70% is VCs, voluntary contributions. And I'll take the opportunity to mention that our number one donor here is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And thank God for them, because they are extremely active in the field of making a better world.
That's really interesting. So the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is your number one donor. Now, you're the CIO at the World Health Organization. And so what does that role mean? What does that involve?
Well, that involves putting all our energy being the strategic enablers that we should be to help the WHO and its partners and its clients, and the clients are everybody, achieve its goals. So then we can structure how we go about that, but that's the role. I am leading the IT platoon worldwide to make sure that we do that right. So then I'm sure you'll ask me what it entails to be a strategic enabler, how you do that, and what kind of things do we need to transform or support or enable. And yeah, usual stuff, ERPs, infrastructure, but then it goes into cybersecurity with a twist. We'll get into the twist. The natural business process support, except that your business processes in this sector are slightly different from the one you would expect in the private sector, but your discipline still applies. Information management, business intelligence, but also proactive BI, predictive BI, and what I call correlation engines. And of course, when you get lost somewhere and when you get thrown into a hurricane of unknown things, your lifeline is the stuff you've been trained with, the discipline of getting things done, your PMO, the management of the triple constraint, your natural ability to be a business process mapper, and things like that. And they come very handy, especially under pressure of a grade 3 emergency, whether it's Ebola, Zika, or something else.
So you are providing the infrastructure for your offices around the world to conduct their daily business, but at the same time, when you have these outbreaks, you're providing the infrastructure that enables them to communicate, to collaborate, to analyze the data, and perform all the other functions and so forth.
That's the idea.
The organization has been around since 1948. And obviously, for any organization to be in business for so long, it must go through a constant evolution change to remain relevant. And so would you tell us how the WHO manages to stay relevant over all these many years?
I'm going to cheat a little bit because somebody else summarized it better than I could. We had the visit of Angela Merkel during the World Health Assembly a couple of years ago. And she said, WHO is the only international organization that has universal political legitimacy on global health issues. And that alone explains why we don't have much choice. I mean, we have to stay relevant because that's our mandate to pursue those goals. We have partners. We'll get back to this, but those partners cannot get everywhere they need to be. And I think that Angela Merkel was absolutely correct. And the reason why she chose to say it like that is to convince our member states, all these 194 countries that constitute our governance, that we have to be given the means to do to achieve our goals, and we stay relevant because the alternative is unthinkable.
The alternative being that there is no central worldwide organization to manage or coordinate the outbreak of these various diseases that you look at.
Yes, I mean, if you go back to, I don't think anybody anywhere, and certainly not in our organization, is going to say we're always right, we're always perfect. And so no, but I can tell you that if our Director General, Margaret Chan, had not called upon the Security Council at the time to trigger the global reaction that we got, the world would have been in a much worse shape. We can certainly be criticized for, hey, maybe you should have done it earlier or stronger or faster. Sure. But the organization faced its challenges to help get this crisis under control.
When you joined 2 years ago, I'm sure that the organization, that from a technology perspective and an IT perspective, you've been pushing through various types of transformations. And so what are the innovations, transformations? What have you done, and what is your agenda going forward? I realize it's a very broad question, but what are the things that you've done and that you're working on to change the shape of how technology supports the mission of the World Health Organization?
I'm going to answer your question, but two things. First, when I joined, Margaret Chan gave me a few words of advice, and they said, we're not unlike a lot of the organizations maybe you work for. People don't like change, and she told me, and doctors don't like change either, and they know everything. So I heard something like that with engineers about IT in another company in another life. But so she told me that I would have to have stamina, persistence, and that change is a constant requirement. So she knew it would be tough. And then somebody else asked me the difference between, what is good leadership in a political environment. And it's a tough question, and I think for me at least the answer had to be, make sure you know the difference between what ought to be and what can be, and then pick your battles and then go after the stuff that you know you can do. So now back to your question. I decided to split the problem into key result areas the way I know. So smart infrastructure, cybersecurity, cloud computing and cybersecurity. I'll get back to that in a second. Business processes, business process support, and information management. So these are the zones where I thought we need to make an impact, a structured impact. And in order to do that, of course, you need to have your architect, your infrastructure, but you need to have your army of project managers. I'll go back to that. For me, the discipline of getting things done, the PMO. Without a PMO, you will not get there. So my boss asked me to take the lead into what we call our little lingo here is, our ERP. We call that the GSM. Okay, I'm supposed to remember what GSM stands for, but I don't. So it's our global management system. But I think GMS was taken, so we called it GSM, something like that. Forget that. So we have we have an ERP, and we had to intensify and accelerate the calendar of deliverables for the corporate business process transformation, HR, finance, things like that. And it was given to me. And the way I was trained, usually it's not the CIO that does that. It's you've got a business exec, and then he partners or she partners with the CIO, and together they do something. But here I was asked to be the change agent and the leader for this GSM transformation for a reason. So it starts with having, because we are a complex organization with different regions and different needs, but we have to identify the things that bring us together. So the usual corporate shared services, as I said, HR, finance, inventories, things like that. Because some of the challenges that you face when you have a grade 3 emergency, suddenly we say, okay, boom, I need to have 2,000 people over there very fast, within a few months. So your corporate processes have to allow you to find the right people, find the right skills, a rostering of skills, recruit, onboard, dispatch, manage, bring back, and do again. So this sounds like trivial. It's not. So same thing with managing your supplies, your vaccines, your boots, your gallons of disinfectants, your everything you need to respond to an emergency. So transformation starts there for me. That was year one. And then you start into the cybersecurity. I mean, you tell me when you want me to stop, because
well, it's pretty interesting, and right behind you there is a photograph of, looks like the WHO emergency digital platform, and maybe you can explain what that is.
Yes, in fact, when you do your due diligence, and you say, okay, I think I'm beginning to understand what the problem is, the problem we all face, and you cannot think of yourself as an IT guy. You're not the IT guy. And so don't forget the acronyms. You can think you're the chief process officer or the chief. Forget that. You're an executive in a new environment. It just so happens that you know your IT weapons pretty well, but how do you bring them to play and help everyone? So in the process of identifying my partners, my boss told me, you should probably talk to, okay, you got the Red Cross, you've got UNICEF, you've got a number of other UN agencies that are natural partners, the World Food Program. And then, of course, there's the CDC. So, and when we say the CDC, we think of Atlanta. But there's the CDC, and then there's the European CDC, the Chinese CDC there. So, and I thought I would go visit my brothers in the US at the CDC. I wanted to know, what they have, what they do, what do we share, what do we have in common. So I went there, and so there was good news, more good news, and then a plan, which you saw behind me, which is the visualization of our command center. So I went to visit there. I saw the plateau with people watching the hurricanes forming, watching the cholera outbreak, watching the Ebola in West Africa, watching, they are divided by by SWAT teams per topic. And I thought that was very refreshing and reassuring that some of that was already in place. And then it hit me that this is good, might not be good enough. And by the way, they don't think they're good enough either. They know better. So I came back. And then my Director General, Margaret Chan, said, okay, so what did you see? What have you learned? And so I started to tell her, and she says, "But shoot me a video of what the future should look like." And I thought, wow, okay. It's the first time my CEOs, if I may say, would say it like that. And I said, okay, she said, Mark, you need to synthesize that in like a 3-4 minutes video that shows what we can do. Not vaporware, not science fiction stuff that we can do with technology. Show me. Okay. So I went back to, my awesome team, and they said, "Yeah, okay, let's get cranking." And we shot that video of the shared command center of tomorrow. And tomorrow doesn't have to be neither in 3 years nor a galactic enterprise. It's something that we know we can put together and share with all our partners inside WHO and outside WHO.
And so,
And that's
so in that command, so what are the components of of the command center that you would use to manage a major global health crisis?
So if you look to this side here, you can see, well, you have maps to my right, and then you have supplies. So the idea is, whether it's tactile or not, is to say, I want to see all my warehouses worldwide. I want to see how many of that item I have left there. And please superimpose all the water points here and tell me how many medical centers I have in a radius of 25 miles, or tell me how many white helmets are here, and so you have the streams from the Meteor Center. You have the maps that you can superimpose. You've got all the infrastructure information and all that at your fingertips in near real time.
And where does this I was going to say, where does this data come from? I mean, it's extraordinary. You're collecting data from around the world. So where is that data coming from?
Well, your natural partners. For example, if the World Food Program is in charge of making sure that supplies, whether it's milk or beans or whatever supplies they need to deliver in particular tough places in the world, in the mature command center of the 21st century that we need, every relevant player feeds into your visual command center. And by the way, don't think for a second that, oh, we're done, it's finished, it's over, we have everything. No, you've got feeds from social media that we can use. You've got the Meteo Center. We want to know if there's going to be a very bad weather condition in a zone where we need to intervene, and if it has a correlation on the spread of a particular virus, or things like that. So this, I would argue, and I know it's going to be a controversial statement, but I don't think anyone has such a complete command center today. And it has to be a command center, and it has to be a shared command center within regions, but also for the partners, member states that need to access. Different roles and responsibilities. During Ebola, for example, some people, I mean, you had particular people with different roles. Some about the vaccine, some about the contact tracing. We need to know who's been infected, who did that person, who did that person talk to or touch, or possibly, contaminated. It's called contact tracing, and you need to report back even the burials of people. We needed to have better information on this, and I think that we all know and we all acknowledge, because we are all reasonable people, that during Ebola, it was not. It's the same thing when we do disaster recovery in IT, right? Then we do a postmortem. We say, like, okay, what didn't work? What must we improve in our process? And So what we saw on the command center is we know we need this. We need better GIS, geospatial information systems, and better business intelligence, better reports, faster reports, more accurate reports. We don't want to discover that something happened, 3 weeks in the past. We want to know it happened 2 hours ago. And when I say 2 hours, some people say, why 2 hours? Well, because 2 hours would be actually pretty damn good.
We have a couple of questions from Twitter. And the first one, Arsalan Khan is saying that the US has developed or is creating a federal healthcare architecture. And is there something similar or even bigger, that some analog that the World Health Organization is working on?
Well, okay. I'm not the authority in that zone, but I'll tell you that the international framework exists. You've got IHR and a few other frameworks that in which WHO is extremely active, leading some, building on some others, and we don't reinvent the wheel. So these are mature frameworks at play. So I don't think you're going to find out that there are things that don't talk to one another between the United States, or even one state in the United States and then Europe, and we're not completely there all the time, but these are things very international.
And along those lines, Chris Peterson asks from Twitter, so as an international organization, are you having to deal with hundreds of countries' unique, different data rules?
Different data rules.
I think what he's talking about is, as you are collecting these data feeds, and I'm assuming that this data, many of these feeds are originating in remote locations. What are some of the constraints that you have to be thinking about as you're collecting all of this massive amount of data?
Well, first of all, it's a moving target, but we have a WHO country office in over 150 places, 50 countries. So when we ask for what we call a SITREP, a situation report, it is a standard thing. Now, maybe not as standard as you would want as an IT professional when you exchange electronic files. And in fact, depending on where it is, the way it reaches you is not the same. But the struggle for us is less in the standard formatting of the information, and more in the speed or the means required infrastructure-wise, which is also in the frame of IHR, to make sure that if you're in a place where you're not as lucky as here, where you've got Wi-Fi and high-speed bandwidth. Remember, when the information comes, it comes from the field, goes to from place to village, from village to district, from district to country, from country to region, from region to. So the way you get back all your information into what you hope to be a single point of truth, that's the thing we have to improve more than the agreeing on the vital information or the minimum information that must be transmitted from A to B.
And so what is your plan, or what are the things that you're doing in order to collect this data rapidly and overcome these challenges that you were just describing?
Well, first of all, as part of the transformation, remember if you ask me, okay, the vision for IT, the mission of IT, the strategy, the battles that we choose to fight, and the tactics, the means we commit to the battles, I would tell you that to be strategic enablers, we need to be with the business. The reform of WHO includes, before Ebola, we had two business units. I'm sorry to call them that, but one for humanitarian, the other one for pandemic, and we realized that, in fact, there was an executive decision strong of what we had learned, and we believed that we'd be stronger to merge and to have the WHO health emergencies. So we have now this merged business unit called WHE, and we have a new executive that joined us this summer, and we are going to continue our action to support the emergency business unit on, okay, they prioritize the key processes they want to see improved. You can bet that they are extremely interested in enabling as good of a command center as we can have as fast as possible. They are very pragmatic people, so it's not a beauty contest or having the most elegant LED screen. It's about being able to do the work they need to be able to do fast, so better, faster. So that's what we're working on. That's for the emergencies. But WHO is bigger than just emergencies. So we have other goals in the goal in the Sustainable Development Goals. So let's not forget that other business execs are in our enterprise. They are called ADGs, Assistant Director Generals, and you've got emergency. We talked about it, but we have the other business units on communicable disease, non-communicable disease, family, women, children, and others. So we need to understand their goals and find a way to help them achieve their goals. As part of that transformation, in the category, remember I talked about the 4 buckets: smart infra, cybersecurity, business process support. There's the IM, the information management reform, understanding what are the information assets we have in the World Health Organization, including one that I like a lot, which is the Global Health Observatory, and where we get information from countries on all dimensions of health. That's a good base, but we want to go beyond collecting what happened last year. We want to know what happens now and what is likely to happen tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So that's the next frontier.
What about cybersecurity? I know that is an extremely important topic for you, as for many organizations, but you're so distributed in 150 different countries that I can't even imagine how do you deal with that? It's got to be overwhelming.
It can be. It depends what you're trying to resolve or to protect against. So privacy is important to us. Security, of course. I can tell you that 2 years ago, when I started to talk about cloud computing, I saw some smiles, some funny smiles, like, so I hear that you think we're going to do cloud computing. And I could not understand why the skepticism or the irony, and I realized pretty quickly that talking to some of my internal partners, who, by the way, at the time were not necessarily natural partners. They were more like, no, we're not going to do cloud computing. It's not possible. So, what do you mean? Why are we not to do cloud computing? Cloud computing is not just something to save money, it's something to enable speed. It's something, so we're going to cut ourselves from a lot of opportunities if we do that. And I said, well, rather than telling me that it's not possible, why don't you explain to me the things that we must overcome for you to find cloud computing acceptable? Because you shouldn't care how or where I do it, but you do. So what's the problem? And I was explaining to like, look, when you were in San Francisco, okay, you were US Gov, so you had to make sure that the cloud is government class cloud. And actually, we were probably one of the first cities in the US to have a government class cloud with everybody in there. So great. Well, here it's not French Gov or US Gov or whatever Gov. It's an international enterprise, and we have diplomatic immunities that must be preserved and protected. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So all right. So so I said, but if we go to the cloud, we will be encrypted. Yes, but you will be encrypted, but you don't own the keys. The keys are owned by the cloud owner, whether it's Google, Microsoft, whatever cloud you choose. And that means that if they are under subpoena to provide data, they have to execute themselves. And as if you read the press, that there was an appeal by Microsoft in Ireland, and another one in Google, and so I said, wait, what if I enable encryption with me, WHO, owning the keys? Would that be okay? And I said, yeah. Can you do that? Said, yes, we can do that. By the way, we've done that, and we are the first. We are the first UN agency to have gone in the cloud, fully encrypted, both in the cloud by the cloud vendor, which is great, and on top of that, encrypted by us with proprietary keys. So problem resolved. And the internal people that were in charge of making sure we protect this are now natural business partners. And they said, okay, well, those guys are really enablers. And now we're in the cloud. We're in the cloud on ServiceNow. We're in the cloud on our human resource platform for rostering, onboarding, and recruiting. And also, I'm forgetting a couple, but okay, it's done. And O365, of course, in the cloud, also encrypted. So it's creating some vocations in other agencies and also in other organizations, and it's good. So it's one challenge. If anything, the breach, the hacking that we've seen, whether in Yahoo or even in US Gov or this has been the decade of hackers and wake-up calls for CISOs and CIOs around the world. It is a severe concern for all of us, and it's not going to disappear anytime soon. We have to make sure that we have information classification done well. We need to identify the assets. What's public, what's restricted internal. What's trade secret or diplomatic protected, things like that. But we haven't found a problem that we could not resolve for now.
So you have not been hit, hopefully not yet, with a major data breach. So far what you've done has worked.
Maybe. No, I think more than saying this, I think that what's important is it was more enabling us to go to the cloud and with all reasonable measures of protection. Look, I'm not naive. If it is possible to hack into a federal databases and steal my biometrics somewhere in Washington D.C., I don't see why it wouldn't be possible to breach something else. So I don't have the arrogance to believe that we are bulletproof. I was just using that example to say that when you discuss with your business partners internally, there are solutions, innovation. In that case, for us, it was a new software platform to keep our keys and to encrypt, which, by the way, is not trivial. You need to understand what you're doing. There are some tricks in encryption.
Well, I will say that it amazes me when CIOs of even smaller organizations say, "Oh, we don't trust the cloud because we can do a better job with security, a better job than the major vendors," and it just seems impossible to me for a small for an organization of almost any size, except maybe the very largest organizations in the world. The cloud vendors are going to do a better job with security.
No, I believe that. I think you're right. I think that it's a condition of business. The cloud providers are very, very well equipped, and I think they are in the better position to provide security. And yet, and still, they will be hacked in some ways.
So we have just a couple of minutes left, and so very quickly, what is on your radar as the next big things that you're focused on? Just very quickly, because we have only a few minutes left.
Well, for me, there's no doubt that infrastructure, whether it's your ground, your network, your servers, whether you do insourcing, outsourcing, cloud, no cloud, doesn't matter. Infrastructure is supposed to be under control. Your business processes, you need to be smart. Your business people have to be smart. You need to be good at business process mapping and Lean Six Sigma and improving the yield of your processes. Been there, done that. Okay, cybersecurity is a curveball at you, so just deal with it, and just if you don't have a CISO, get one, get a good one, get a team, get some means, and get cranking. So what's next? You've got smart infrastructure, you've got smart processes. So for me, the next big thing has to be in the category of information management. You see, I can tell you, dear CEO, dear board, you see, we've sold so much of this, our profit margin was that, and blah, blah, blah. Boring. So in our business, I want to be able to say one day, from what we've been able to analyze with our correlation engine, this one's a good one because that's innovation, we have a 0.87 probability that there's going to be the next pandemic here on the map. Wow. Okay. So between predictive analysis, so the advanced BI, and the correlation analysis, that's where I put my money. Well, figure of speech. We are currently in discussions with some people that want to that believe that this is true, and they believe it's closer than we think. So I said, fine, come on in, water is fine. I'm going to throw a couple nasty ones at you and show me what your correlation engine can do. I can tell you that there's a lady that used that model, and she predicted the cholera outbreak in Cuba 2 months before it happened. Now, using the same technique, we think we're able to, the people we talked to were able to validate a model that took a medical research team about 2 years to conclude. Their engine validated it within weeks. Now, that gets me excited. Why? Because I don't know how many minutes we have, but when in an interview last year, Mr. Gates was asked, he wants to know what scares him. I mean, what is the thing he's afraid of? And this was a great interview with Ezra Klein. He talked about the most predictable disaster in the history of the human race. So it's not an if. We know it's going to happen when you look at the death chart. Yes, there is such a thing. Then you see. So I don't know, Michael. What do you think is going to kill in excess of 10 million people within a year. There's going to be, aliens, quakes, volcano.
Let's see. I really have no idea what could kill 10 million people in a year. I guess we'd have to look back. Aliens is a good answer, I suppose. But if we look back in the history of the U.S., we would probably be looking at some type of infectious disease, assuming it's not an intentional act of war. So please.
Well, okay. So Mr. Gates was a bit optimistic in his, because but it was an educated answer. And if you look at history, what did kill millions of people? So if you look at the chart, you will find, as Mr. Gates pointed, the blip in World War I, the 25 million people. Okay, and then World War II, 65 million people. And in between, you had another one with whom you cannot negotiate much. It's the Spanish flu virus that killed about, plus or minus 50 million, and that's the beauty of it. People cannot give you an exact number, but we think the latest estimate were like 65 to 100 million people.
So some evolution of the flu virus. Well, that's a very upbeat way to end our show. And what's the likelihood of this happening? And I hope that you at the World Health Organization are going to help make sure that it doesn't happen.
No, but yes, that's the idea. That's what everybody works to prevent, or at least to be better prepared. I like to say when I see turf wars or silo thinking, I usually tell people, remember to not forget why we work together or what it takes to prevent the next pandemic. We work together because should a Spanish flu virus be unleashed on the modern world, remember the last Spanish flu was 1918. But if you saw something like that with as nasty a strain on the modern world, the mathematical model funded by Mr. Gates, his foundation, shows that we would see about, the range of 33 million people die within 250 days.
Well,
now if this doesn't get your attention, if this doesn't want you, if it doesn't make you want to, forget your badge, forget your brand and say, okay, I'm in, then I'm not too sure what will. Because that's the real no flags, no boundaries, no political blah, blah, blah. This is humanity and the threat for our global population. I think that's the real inspiring reason why we should all work together to be better prepared.
Well, thank you, Marc Touitou, the Chief Information Officer for the World Health Organization, for spending the time with us today and for really presenting maybe the most compelling case there is for putting aside petty differences and remembering the mission of whatever organization it is that we're working with and focusing on the goal as opposed to all of these little differences that we might have. Marc Touitou, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have been talking with Marc Touitou, the CIO for the World Health Organization, on episode number 197 of CXOTalk. Thanks everybody for watching, and we will look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.